This is a conversation with Melinda Wittstock. Melinda is a serial entrepreneur. Her mission is to empower women entrepreneurs, and she's in the process of building a multi-billion-dollar tech business. From early childhood on, she discovered her entrepreneurial gene, and actually her strongest trait is her mindset. Of course, I asked her everything about her mindset, how she got it, what it looks like, and what you can specifically adapt to have more success. So if you're a female entrepreneur and if you want to be inspired by another powerful lady, I suggest you to listen to everything she says, adopt her strong mindset, and be stronger, more effective, and better than ever. Melinda, you have this podcast. It's called Wings of Inspired Business. What's that about, and whom is this for?
Yeah, so like a lot of podcasters, I started my podcast because it was the podcast I wish I had had as a serial entrepreneur and female founder in tech. And began at about 2017, and its whole mission is really, because it's called Wings of Inspired Business, it's to lift as we climb, to encourage women to buy from each other, invest in each other's companies, mentor each other, etc. Because together, we all soar higher when we fly together. But more specifically, I look at the entrepreneurial journeys of women who've created 7, 8, and 9-figure businesses, and in a couple of cases, unicorn, billion-dollar businesses. Their entrepreneurial journeys, what they learned along the way, right? What were their secrets of success? What did they have to overcome? And really with a lot of practical tips, for anyone who's thinking of starting a business or is in that moment, like we are with my company now, poised for rapid scale. And what does that look like? We cover all industries. And, it's been an amazing journey. I mean, I love doing the podcast because apart from paying it forward, with my own insights as a 5-time serial entrepreneur, it's wonderful to be able to gather all that wisdom together and give really a safe place for women to learn that it's okay to succeed without guilt, trade-off, or apologizing to anybody. And at a time when women still only get 2% of the available venture capital money, what can be done to really change that game of business?
I see. Why do you think why do you have this focus on women, or do you think that it's more beneficial for them to be, let's say, help? Yeah, of course. And just for example, I myself, for example, I'm a man, I'm a guy, and I do not talk specifically to guys, for example. So I would like just to understand how
actually, my podcast.
Yeah,
my podcast has a lot of men that listen to it because there's not a lot of men that can create a 7-figure, 8-figure, or 9-figure business.
Right.
It just so happens that what women have to deal with is different often than men. Like I said, 2% of the venture capital money for venture qualified companies goes to women. And that number hasn't moved in 2 decades. So what's going on there? What's the responsibility? How can women learn to kind of, what are they missing? But also what are venture capitalists missing? What are the specific things that women go through in entrepreneurship that are different than men? And there are differences. There are a lot of similarities as well. But more than 50% of my audience are men.
That's interesting. So what's your opinion? Why do you think is that the case, that they are that there is this difference, or what are the different, I'm just curious, in what way is the challenge of becoming an entrepreneur different for a woman as opposed to a man?
Well, I think in the funding context, so much of venture capital deals or getting investment is based on your relationships, right? Like, are you in the club? Are you known? And it can be difficult for women to know how to be part of that club or even be accepted into that club, right, to begin with. So that's part of the issue. The other part of the issue is women tend to come up with different business models in my experience. they tend to be less likely to be a pure play tech company and more the application of tech in an innovative way to disrupt an industry that they have deep domain expertise in. They also tend to come to entrepreneurship a little bit older than men, so they don't fit the kind of pattern recognition stereotype of the guy in the hoodie in his garage eating ramen noodles, like too many carbs, don't have a garage, that kind of thing. And they tend to come into entrepreneurship more into their 30s, 40s, and even 50s when they've already tried to disrupt an industry from within a corporation. Where they've already have a lot of experience with hiring and firing and scaling and building teams and doing all these sorts of things. Whereas the prototype for the male entrepreneur is to come into it in his 20s with none of that business or experience or domain experience. And VC puts a team of all that around them. So there are a lot of really big differences. Also in the best time, there's a lot of research that shows the best time where women really excel as entrepreneurs are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And that's where they're really crushing it. And men in their 20s and 30s. So we don't fit the pattern, and investors like to invest based on pattern recognition. In fact, they say so. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. The other issue is women tend to create businesses too that are addressing a market aimed at 51% of the population, i.e. women. And I can't tell you how many women have been told, oh, hey, your product doesn't address a big enough market. And the woman's like, wait a minute, it's like half the population. What are you talking about? Because the man can't necessarily see or relate to a product, say about women's health or such, that they don't experience themselves. So those are some of the external issues. And then meantime, there's also an issue with women just having the confidence to be able to know their worth, know their value, be able to talk confidently about their numbers, and also, quite frankly, dream big enough. A lot of women start small businesses. There are not a lot of women that say, yeah, hey, I'm building $1 billion business, right? You just don't see it. So, and it's partly the way we've been acculturated as a society. I think there's a lot of fear around it because women think, oh, men won't like them if they're ambitious, or their girlfriends won't like them anymore for daring to dream big. And so there's a lot of societal pressures, I think, that can also have the effect of dampening women's true ability.
I see. Cool. So can you name some of your, let's say, most inspiring and interesting guests you had on the podcast and share some stories of theirs or success stories?
Oh, gosh. I mean, there's so many. Today is episode 777. One of my earliest episodes. It was with a woman called Ping Fu. Ping Fu was one of the first early kind of founder team members at Netscape way back in the day. And she hired Mark Andreessen, from A16Z or Andreessen Horowitz. She also invented 3D printing. And she has an incredible story because she came here from China with $8 and couldn't even speak the language. And how she was able to, her journey is incredible and inspiring. So that was a great episode. Kara Golden, the founder of Hint Water, that's a $2 billion business, how she created Hint Water basically in her kitchen and what she went through to build that business. How she had to take on the bottling industry, how she was sleeping on bottling floors to learn the process herself. She invented a way to pasteurize water, which hadn't been done before, and built this business. Those are the caliber of a lot of the women I talk to on the show. There are also a lot of other women who just have tremendous insights about the psychology of business or the mindset that you have to be in to be able to succeed as an entrepreneur, because it requires so much resilience, so much self-belief to the point of craziness, being open and willing to fail and fail often. I like to say fail forward. All these things we talk about. Also, money mindset issues, knowing your value and such. And today's episode with Tissa Richards, I really, really love because Tissa has created 7 of her own businesses, has raised millions and millions of dollars for her companies, has 7 of her own patents in cyber security software, very complex patents. She's like me, been there, built that, built lots of businesses. I've built 5 significant ones. And just sharing the journey about, what she's learned along the way, how to get funded, how to develop what she calls kind of a certain swagger that you need as an entrepreneur, that kind of quiet confidence and persuasiveness and presence that any founder or CEO really needs to succeed.
I see. Thank you. How did you become an entrepreneur?
Oh gosh, it's a long story. So I think it's sometimes in your DNA. I remember as a little kid, I was just about to turn 6, and I went door to door in my neighborhood with my black Labrador retriever, demanding prepayment for my show. Okay. I had this whole show. I had like sprinklers, costume changes, a music track, all this stuff and I just assumed that people would pay for this. And they did. And I came home with $100 and asked my dad where we could find 100 chairs. So really, I trace that as the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I mean, it was just kind of, it's kind of like who you are, maybe. I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was. But I was always very entrepreneurial. Just even being the editor-in-chief of my student newspaper at McGill University, when the student council or student government was trying to cut off our funding, I created the advertising department of the student newspaper, went and sold ads, made the paper profitable, increased the distribution to Montreal citywide, figured out that I had to figure out how the paper could really attract a lot more advertising. So created the first ever English language entertainment listings that the city of Montreal in Canada had ever had. So I was doing that when I was like 18, 19. And I'm also an award-winning journalist. I joined the Times of London as a business correspondent and then its media correspondent, writing about this new thing called the internet. Joined the paper back in like 1989 or whatever as a 22-year-old. And I got the opportunity to interview people like Steve Jobs and Ted Turner and Richard Branson and so many people. And I was a sponge. I was the type of person who wanted to learn every single thing, about them and how they did business. And along the way, I became a television news anchor. And then I started creating programs, for the BBC. I created Financial Times Television. I was the executive producer of those and also the host. And long story short, there was a certain point where I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to start my first business. And the first really significant one, I've had all kinds of side hustles along the way as well. The first significant one was Capital News Connection. And within about 5 months of launching that, we had an audience, a daily audience of 3 million people. It was a political news agency that focused on the local impacts of decisions made in the U.S. Congress, in the Senate and the House of Representatives, and what that actually meant for people, on the ground. And we served 300 radio stations, a whole bunch of major market television stations, newspapers, and increasingly digital properties. And I really developed my love of tech during Capital News Connection because I created one of the first ever crowdsourcing apps. Back in the day, it was known as a widget. It lived on people's websites and grew that to an audience of 3 million people in just 8 months and got very, very stuck in the whole realm of the beginnings of AI, the beginnings of, obviously, machine learning and unsupervised machine learning, natural language processing and such. And so I have this really weird background of creating award-winning content that has won me many Edward R. Murrow awards and others besides, but also creating algorithms and also really, inventing things at that intersection of media and tech. So that combined with my podcasting background and my content creation background will tell you a lot about why I founded Podopolo, which is the first ever truly interactive podcasting app that also enables podcasters to grow their reach, grow their engagement, grow their revenue with a really robust creator economy aspect of that, but also a recommendation engine that's very sophisticated that allows listeners to more easily discover the perfect podcast for them. It was kind of a convergence of my entire background now manifesting in this fifth significant business of mine, which is just closing a funding round now in the next week or so, and we're poised for rapid scaling.
Wow, that sounds awesome. So your podcast platform, is it like, do you serve like all kinds of podcasts? So would I be a potential customer for you, or is it like more
your podcast, if it has, yeah, I'm sorry. If it is a little delay here. Yes, if you have an RSS feed associated with your podcast and it's not exclusive to any platform like, say, a Spotify or whatever, it's automatically on Podopolo. We automatically ingest all known podcasts in audio and video. So we have about 6 million now in all languages and all genres. And with so much, and these episodes are updating instantaneously. It's very fast. And one of the reasons for the recommendation engine is it can be difficult to find podcasts that you're actually interested in, right? For a listener. And this is what we hear a lot from listeners, that they go to Spotify or Apple or any other podcast app and they see the same podcasts all the time. And they're delighted at Podopolo because we suggest things that we know they, and by extension, because the app is social, that their friends are interested in as well. Meantime, we also offer people the ability to create very short clips of a podcast to share with their friends. This helps the podcasters be more easily discovered, just for the simple fact that if I share with you, Sven, like, hey, you got to listen to this podcast, it's an hour, and you're going to say, okay, that's really cool, I'll get around to it, but you may or you may not, because you may not have an hour. But if I share with you a 30-second clip, you're going to say, oh, yeah, that's really cool. Actually, I really like that. I'm going to subscribe to that podcast. Moreover, that 30-second clip counts as a download for the podcaster. So it's helping the podcaster really grow, their reach, but also engage directly with their listeners and viewers. And all that speaks to a number of ways that we help podcasters monetize their content.
Oh, that's very interesting. So my podcast is on your show. I like that thought. On your sorry, not show, but platform, of course. That's pretty cool.
On the platform. So, it's a free mobile app.
Yeah. I need to start using it because like podcasts. I've always like wondered what would be like the ideal length of a podcast. Is it like, like the most successful podcast, of course, Joe Rogan, he can, sometimes takes for him 5 or 6 hours. He has like these long conversations. And some other podcasters are like my team always, like, they used to say, oh yeah, make it shorter, make it like 20 minutes or so, like even 30 minutes is too much. What's your take on that?
It really depends on so many different factors, right? It depends on your audience. Who is your audience? How much do you know about your audience? Do you really know what they actually want? Do you really know who's listening? And this is the other aspect of Podopolo that I think is very revolutionary, that we actually share by virtue of our artificial intelligence and our AI powering the platform. We're able to share with podcasters like you exactly who's listening to your show. So maybe on a hosting platform, you know how many countries, or like maybe you have some basic analytics, like how long they listened. We're able to present to you, the personas that are listening to your show, the overlaps. I found with my podcast, I was quite surprised to learn that even though it's a podcast about business and entrepreneurship, I had a sizable overlap with people who are interested in comedy. And so I don't know, maybe I'm funny. I have no idea, right? Like, no clue. But anyway, I mean, right? And also I can see overlaps between other podcasts where I have an overlap audience. right? Where it makes sense for, say, you and me to get together and cross promote each other's shows to, grow our respective audiences, for instance. You can see how people listen when they drop off. So the when they drop off is interesting because, say, on your podcast, everybody's leaving, like, say, 90% of people are leaving at 13 minutes. The answer is either my podcast should be 13 minutes or what am I doing at 13 minutes that might be alienating people? Yeah. And so it really, that kind of data analytics made actionable allows podcasters to be more responsive to their audiences. And it's something that's really been missing from the whole podcast industry.
I see. And how do you see the podcast industry right now? Do you think like there is like already more than enough podcasts, or do you think, oh yeah, there's plenty of room for new podcasts?
I think there's plenty of room for more podcasts, and it's the fastest growing media of all time. And a couple of points to this answer, so bear with me. It's the most popular of all time because it's authentic, because people really crave something real, something that has more depth than the ephemera of social media conversations and all the outrage and all the stuff. And also because people want to learn things and people want and love conversation and just love the sound of the human voice. It's not going anywhere. It is going to grow, incredibly quickly. The other point I'd make is that there's a podcast for everybody and that every individual, has their own voice. But not all podcasts will ever be huge. Like the very few are like Joe Rogan's size because the nature of podcasting is narrow casting as opposed to, say, broadcasting. It's, podcasters really can, many credibly serve like a loyal 1,000 people an episode, which is fine. The problem with that, however, is it's very difficult for people to discover that podcast, a problem that Podopolo solves. But the way the advertising industry has approached podcasting, it's as if it were broadcasting, and they're only interested in putting money into the podcasts like Joe Rogan's or some of the really big ones that have massive numbers of downloads. And these are more the general interest kind of podcasts or entertainment podcasts or such that or they're launched by a famous person that already has a massive following. Like if Elon Musk had a podcast, right? Like he's just going to debut with millions of downloads right out of the gate just by virtue of who he is. But that's not most podcasters. So what we found is 98% of podcasters are left out of advertising because you need at least 10,000 downloads an episode to qualify. And that is only 1.5% of all podcasts worldwide qualify based on those terms. So this is the other area where Podopolo is wildly disruptive because we found a way to serve that 98.5% of the market by virtue of the AI and our ability to match the right advertiser with pre-qualified audiences on podcasts or across a number of podcasts so that advertiser gets a return, even though the audiences are small, and podcasters get a really, generous share of that ad revenue, which they never qualified for before. And that's one of the main disruptive parts of Podopolo and our approach. There are other ways that are being developed on the platform too for podcasters to make money, including like putting premium content behind a paywall, being able to sell their courses easily with one click, all of those sorts of things, tip jars. Also things like coming soon later in the year, the ability to create smart contracts and NFTs. And moreover, we also pay podcasters for bringing their listeners to Podopolo, up to $2 a listener. So that's a really easy way to take pre-made swipe copy and graphics or pre-made audio credits, invite your listeners over to Podopolo where they can interact with you directly and you can create a great experience for them and reward them and make them feel seen and heard and really engaged in your mission, in your podcast. And at the same time, get paid. And we make it really easy for you to do that.
That's pretty cool. I have a platform called Digistore 24 where we empower creators who want to sell online courses, supplements, ebooks, stuff like that, digital
Great.
products.
Yeah.
And what we do is we do the payment system, the recurring charging, banks all of their bank accounts, PayPal, credit cards, you name it. We distribute the money to the governments who want to receive the taxes, for example, the VATs, the sales taxes and stuff. In Europe, where I'm from, it depends on kind of like where the end customer sits. The sale has to be taxed. And there's these different taxations and these different types of taxes. And I automatically, like my system, my platform pays the tax for the sale and distributes the revenue between the affiliate, the product owner, or maybe even the joint venture partner of the product owner. It could be several parties that are supposed to receive the money, and we do that all automatically. So I can really relate to what you're talking about. I think that's pretty cool. I'm also a tech entrepreneur, just like you.
Well, that sounds amazing. Yeah, that sounds really good what you're doing, Sven. And I think there's a lot of kind of interesting overlap. Like we could collaborate because, these are the things like when we look at podcasters, there's different types of podcasters. There's a lot of podcasters who launch a podcast just because they have a lived experience or, a mission or just something they want to change about the world. And it's entirely mission driven. They want to be heard and they want to change something. There's another group of podcasters who have an existing business or like a book or something like that. And a podcast is part of their marketing funnel into their existing business. Yeah, right? Like a huge and growing number of folks, right? And then there's a bunch of other podcasters who it's their business. It's like the only thing they do. They earn all their money from it, right? And variations in between. In my case, when I launched Wings of Inspired Business, and it was so difficult because I went through this personally. I came at podcasting with all this tech expertise, marketing expertise, business expertise, content expertise. And it was so hard, to be discovered or build an audience, let alone monetize. And in my case, Wings of Inspired Business created a whole bunch of series of side hustles, like, repurposing content to make, like do online summits, monthly recurring revenue kind of membership programs. I did this whole affiliate thing that was going on, made money from the podcast that way. I did retreats, pre-pandemic. I did all these things. I ended up like creating a podcast only to create 6 businesses to support the podcast. So it was kind of an interesting way about like how hard it actually is. And most podcasters don't want to have to do all that. So that's why we want to just take that, stress of like, launch a podcast and all of a sudden you got to be an expert in SEO and in social media and in this and in that. And a lot of folks don't have the time or the inclination. So how can we just take that all off them and make it much easier?
Yeah, absolutely. I can so relate to that because originally Digistore24, I founded that in 2011. So quite a while ago, became the market leader in Europe. We're now like conquering the English speaking market, and I wanted to be in the background. So I did not want to show my face publicly originally. That was my plan because I'm a bit shy, So like my nature is that I'm like more reserved and shy, but then after a while, like, we have all these clients who sell coachings and storytelling and marketing. Like we're kind of like a marketing platform because we also do conversion optimization on shopping carts and stuff like that. And they also, so kind of like my clients told me like, Sven, you need to put your face out there. You need to spread a message. You need to inspire people to, start a business, start a side hustle, sell online courses, stuff like that. You need to put yourself out there. So I'm kind of reverse engineering what you just said. So I'm like, okay, as a result of that, I started a podcast. It's not just on film and YouTube. It's also on Spotify and iTunes and stuff like that. And then I'm also like working on creating a mastermind because, we need to, we need to give great experiences to our biggest clients. And some of them are super successful. Of course, it's men and women, both types of entrepreneurs. I think the online business world is perfect also for women in particular, because because you don't have to worry about tech. A lot of women don't like tech. Let's be honest with that. But there's no issue anymore around tech, because there's platforms like your platform, like my platform. They take care of all the tech. And I am not a tech guy. Yeah, I'm not a tech guy either. Not at all. Like, I can't program.
All the AI. Like, I experimented with an episode. Yeah. I experimented with a chat GPT to see if it could write an episode of mine. That was kind of fun. Did that like just after New Year's. Chat GPT, what's your advice for female founders? Like just questions like that. That was kind of interesting. But there's lots of ways. I mean, there's a lot of, and just also the no code movement. There are a lot of ways to really demystify technology, specifically for women. Women are weirdly suited to it as well, because I've always been, confused by this, because programming is a language. It's not about math. And I think somewhere along the line, women get this idea in middle school that like, oh, I'm not good at math. And they just sort of, I watched my daughter convince herself she wasn't good at math. She's really good at math, but she just kind of convinced herself she wasn't. And then there's this correlation between, the social, the image of how it's how coding is kind of portrayed, like maybe even in movies or whatever, or sitting in a dark room or like this or that puts women off. And it's unfortunate, because there are, and we have had the pleasure of, and we're actually actively recruiting women engineers, who with the right mindset are absolutely great at it. That's one side of it. But the other is there's so many ways in which it's much easier to deploy technology and much cheaper and such, so. And then, by the way, there's a lot of really great engineers that are currently out of work. So if anyone is hiring, now is a good time to be picking up all those people from Google and Twitter and like Spotify, actually, and a whole bunch that are laying off great talent. And we're in a great place right now at Podopolo, because we're hiring and we're just attracting an amazing caliber of talent, as a result of landing funding now when everyone else is kind of contracting.
Yeah, I think people are, if they think that they're not, let's say, compatible with tech, somehow they convince themselves that they're not. I think nowadays everyone is proficient with computers, even also women as well, because smartphones are computers. So everyone is using computers all day long. So for me, there's no difference really between men and women. It's just like,
well, it takes me back. 100%. It takes me back to the origin really of the Wings podcast. So one of the reasons it's called Wings of Inspired Business is because it really is at the intersection of business growth and personal growth. And what I mean by that is entrepreneurship is a mind game. Like, if you can see it, you stand a chance of doing it. But if you cancel yourself out because you have a mindset that tells you all the things you can't do or why you can't do it, well, like you've lost right there. So the mindset is critical.
I can tell that you have a great mindset. How did you get your mindset?
It's, oh gosh, a long journey. I think one of my earliest memories is I remember observing my father, and, when my brothers and I or my mom would get sick, and I'd always ask him, how come you never get sick? And he would say, because I don't believe in it. And I remember that really stuck with me. I was like, kind of interesting. So my dad never got sick, and it's just like, oh, it's really simple. I just don't believe in it. Wow. Okay. So that's really simple, but it's also really complex. So what's that about? Anyway, fast forward all these years, and I like to joke that if you want therapy, just become an entrepreneur. And the reason for this is along the journey of building a company, it's hard. you're going to be confronted with all kinds of beliefs that you formed as a child before you even had a frontal lobe. Like before you even, and perhaps it was something as simple as watching a TV show or hearing your parents argue about money or something that happened to you, or maybe you got bullied, or it could be anything. And, the research shows that 80% of our actions are entirely run by our subconscious rather than our conscious minds. And if that's the case, and we're all stuck in toddlerhood in that case, the world is being run by toddlers. Actually, and when you think of the motivation. So these sorts of realizations did send me very much on a personal growth or perhaps a spiritual growth journey. I'm a big believer in meditation. My gateway into meditation was yoga. I started doing yoga in the 90s. That led me really to meditation, to things like visualization, to like affirmation, to actually learning that if I was triggered by something, anything that makes you angry, it could be like you're angry because a car passed you that you didn't think should pass you, or you might be angry just like a certain person, just the way they behave makes you feel uncomfortable or something, any kind of trigger. That is an opportunity. That's an opportunity to look within and say, what is it about me, right? That where do I have some memory of this? What is it about me that I can release so I no longer have to have this experience? I like to say that when the lesson is learned, the experience is no longer necessary. And all these things that are adverse in our lives, particularly as an entrepreneur, when you have a challenge, it's always an opportunity. I think the best entrepreneurs are, in fact, alchemists. They're people that take coal, turn it into diamonds, and just do that on a minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year basis. And you're constantly being tested. And it's constantly how can I release the stuff that doesn't serve me? How can I be in alignment, not only with myself and my core purpose or my unique genius, why I'm here right now in an Earth suit on planet Earth? How can I be in alignment with that? And how can I open myself up to inspiration beyond me and be more of a channel and connected in flow? And that's really how I think about it. And it's like anything, it's been an evolutionary process. I wish I could say I was this wise in my 20s, 30s, 40s, etc. But sadly, no. It's been an experience to have this level of understanding and connection and alignment, 100%.
That's very interesting because I used to sell dating advice. So I was a dentist originally, and then I sold dating advice.
You were a dentist?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that also taught me a lot, and I had to go through a lot of stuff, to be honest. It's also, dentistry is very hard to study. Because you have to work on the daytime and learn at nighttime. And work means that you actually treat patients, of course, with supervision. Yeah, people like the professor and their assistants, they're watching you and checking each and every step. But it's hard work, and you need to get your own patients. So it's not like they give you a lot of patients. They give you some patients. I mean, the clinic, you have to organize your own patients. It's quite entrepreneurial. So I went, and walked on the streets and I approached women and convinced them to become my patients. I had to do stuff like that because otherwise I would have to repeat the semester. That's not fun. And the semester is expensive. It's funny. Yeah. And then I started, I became interested in dating psychology and relationships and how that works because, I was, as I said, I was pretty shy and reserved, and those men tend to have a difficult time with getting a girlfriend and stuff like that. Whereas like my not so shy friends, they didn't have a problem with that, like not at all. So I was very interested in the psychology of it. And so I also felt like if you want to, let's say, become more successful with women as a guy, you have to go through all your childhood shit. It's really like you said,
Totally.
it's like because the females, they give you like, they sense everything, they know everything about you, they're so smart, and it's like you cannot, there is no real way to pretend that you're confident, or to pretend that you're quote alpha or whatever, or strong or smart. You cannot pretend anything, because they figure it out like in a heartbeat. And so you're confronted with everything that went wrong in your childhood, and you have to kind of fix it. And so it's kind of therapy. And then I started a business based on that. Also was also successful, but the same thing. Like, I had to go through my childhood again, and now it's still going on. It's so funny. It's really, like, what you say is so true. It's therapy. It's a journey, and it's kind of crazy because it's so extreme, because you're confronted with all kinds of craziness,
Oh,
that like, for
gosh.
example, you have two departments that fight each other, like, wow, and you think, hey, the enemy's outside. Why not focus on making more sales? Why are we fighting inside, and stuff like that? And it's crazy. Being an entrepreneur is really, it's so interesting, and it's really, like you say, it's not really, so for me, it's not so much about the money or even the why. It's like, for me, it's really like, just making it. I want to win, and I want to win in this field, and I want to do a good job, and I want to overcome the difficulty, because we get beaten up a lot, but of course that ultimately leads to success, and then you make a lot of people happy, then you have a lot of impact, and then you can feel good about yourself as well in between. But it's really tough, and I think it's tough for both men and women, because we have
Yeah.
strengths and weaknesses, and some
Right.
women have.
Yeah.
It's
It's
hard for.
hard. I mean,
It's hard, yeah.
there's no question, because in on entrepreneurship, there's the stuff that you can control and stuff that you can't control.
Yeah.
I mean, think of businesses that get, caught up, say, like COVID hits suddenly, and like all their revenue just, you can't control
Yeah.
that. You can control your reaction to it. Um, or, so external events, or like a new competitor, or something happens, or, you lose a key team member, or like, I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can't control. So getting very clear on what it is that you can.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think entrepreneurship is almost like, the way I've come to see it now, it's like a way of life. It's almost like a philosophy. It's like a way of life, because for people who go into entrepreneurship as a way to make money, that's foolish. Because in fact, if you want to really make money, be a banker, be a lawyer, be like, and make sure that you figure out how to make passive income, figure out all those things, right? Because entrepreneurship is really risky. You can put your life and soul into it and it can fail. I mean, I can't tell you, we're recruiting right now. I can't tell you how many amazing, talented people are coming from more startup failures in the last couple of months than I can count. I mean, it's really sad. And it's to do with economics. It's to do with all kind, or VCs just not willing to do follow-on rounds. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff that you don't anticipate when you set out. So, you have to have a really big burning fire inside you, and a pilot light that, in my case, it is about the why. It
Mm-hmm.
is about the mission. It's about impact. I'm not really doing it to get rich. I assume that if we create value for everybody and all of our customers, that there's a value exchange inherent in that. The more value we create, the more social impact, the better, Podopolo is also a social impact company. So, how can we as individuals and collectively as team members working with our customers, our advertisers, everybody, actually solve a lot of the world's, or at least, contribute to
Hmm.
solving a lot of the world's most intractable problems? What does that actually look like? How can we leave each room better than it was before they encountered us, or leave each person that meets us feeling better than they did before? I mean, these are the philosophical groundings of how we operationalize our values at Podopolo. It's about who we're being as much as what we're doing. So to me, for me personally, it's very mission oriented. I will also say, though, that we're busy building a multi-billion-dollar business. And I think the reason why we'll get there, and in a not very many years, is because of that real commitment to operationalizing our values, real commitment to customer first and really creating value, right? But also recognizing that it's not a destination, it's actually a journey. And we're not going to when we get here, I'll be happy. No, you have to choose to be happy as you're building it. Right? It's a choice. And so at some destination, when we've hit this milestone, we have 1 million users, or we have $10 million, or when we have this or whatever, then I'll be happy. No, it's a choice to be happy right now and create from a place of joy and happiness. I think that's also a significant secret of success. And we look at that very closely as we build our team. And as we hire people, we're looking for amazing individuals, but we're also looking at, and this is one of the things that I do, is looking at how they play together. So if you could think of the Podopolo team as a jazz ensemble, right? And you think of each individual has to be amazing at what they do, but they also have to be able to riff off each other to make magic. And that's how we look at our team.
That's amazing. Yeah. I totally can relate to that. So the thing that makes me very happy about our mission at Digistore24, which is basically empowering 1 million entrepreneurs, is to give people freedom and to give them the ability to build things, because I truly believe that entrepreneurs are the only ones who can make society better, who can bring more prosperity and make life better. For me, it's not the politicians who can really do that. I think it's really people who create jobs, run successful businesses, and entrepreneurs are really the ones that improve society. And I totally believe that if we support them, we're doing the best impact we can, and the more the better. And I think that really drives me. That's amazing, and that also helps me through when we have a difficult time. And of course, sometimes it's easier, sometimes you win, sometimes you have challenges, and all in all, it's a great journey. So interesting. I did not receive any VC funds, so I'm not funded externally. In your opinion, when is the right time to think about working with VCs, or would you do it right from the get-go? How do you think about that?
Money's expensive if you take it too early. The best optimal time, if you can bootstrap or friends, family, whatever you got to do, to get to the point where your product or service or whatever is actually growing, and you can prove the metrics that people love the product, right? They're paying you, and that those numbers are starting to go up and there's sort of trajectory. That's more the time to take the money to double down on something that you've proven. The ideal time, and it doesn't always work out like this for people, because depending on the type of company, sometimes you do need money really early just to build the product, right? So it depends on the type of business. But as much as you can, waiting for that moment where you're asking investors to invest, to throw gasoline on a fire that's already burning, you know what I mean? Is the optimal time. And it doesn't always work out that way. I mean, I think the other thing that's really interesting, though, too, about VCs, I think because the power dynamics are simple. Startups go and pitch the VCs, and then we feel judged by them. And as a result of their judging us, as entrepreneurs, we can tend to ascribe a lot of smarts and intelligence and insights and wisdom to VCs that often they don't actually have. There's a very big difference between being invested in or judged by someone who has been an entrepreneur themselves, that they
Mm-hmm.
were once an operator before they became a VC, and someone who, went to Harvard Business School and like worked at McKinsey, and it's all theoretical to them.
Mm.
They can't possibly really understand. Like I think there's sort of a civilian, non-civilian thing around. Like there's an entrepreneur and there's everybody else, because the entrepreneur really knows in there what it takes to do this. And so to be judged by or evaluated by someone who is just entirely theoretical, they really, really just don't know. And they don't necessarily know about your sector. They don't really necessarily know, so not all money is created equal. I would say that one of the most critical things about raising money is to qualify your investors just like they're qualifying you.
Mm.
Major point. How do they treat people? Like, talk to their portfolio companies. What are they doing when the proverbial or the shit hits the fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are they reacting? How do they react to that? So you need to know that, because it's going to happen. How do they treat their other portfolio companies? Like, do your diligence on them, because I've seen so many companies that were really promising take money from the wrong people. And then, and the founder and the vision gets all messed up, and company can fail for taking the wrong money from the wrong people. So, it's a diligence should be a two-way street.
Absolutely. And that's also what kept me from accepting investors. Actually, it's like, because I was kind
brave.
of
That's so brave.
Yeah, because I was kind of afraid of them, for example, KKR came and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're like the biggest private equity company, whatever." I mean, yeah. And then there was like a very young guy, like maybe 21 or so, probably like a very good, business school MBA student or something, sizing me up and interviewing me. And I was like, okay, so there's this university graduate just interviewing me, and probably like I was, that was so scary. I was thinking like, probably I'm going to have to report to him, and he's gonna be my new boss just because I've received some money, and I'm like, oh my god, no. So that
exactly.
I was afraid
it's
of
so
it.
True. Yeah, well, I mean, probably for good reason. It sounds like you trusted your gut, which is another really important part of entrepreneurship, like trying to ascertain what's your intuition, because and how to trust it, and what's just fear based on a subconscious like memory when you were 3, and trying to figure out the difference between those things. Especially looking at everything, accepting funding, hiring the right people, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so I agree. You have to be careful with from whom you accept money, and you have, in my opinion, you also have to know. You have to have a plan what you would do with the money. Because in my case, for example, if I had, let's say, 100 additional million like on the bank, I could not move faster at the moment, because I need to hire specialists. I need to find those specialists. The market is a bit difficult, the job market. So, and once I found them, I need to integrate them. I need to train them to become productive. That takes some time, and money does not necessarily accelerate that at all levels. Of course, it can accelerate.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's good to have it in the bank, though.
Yeah, of course. Well, somehow, but there is inflation too, so it could be also
make your money work for you.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's a happy problem to have. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice problem to have. That's amazing. So, Melinda, like as kind of a last question, can you give 3 tips for starting entrepreneurs when you look back? Things that you should have known, would you tell to your younger self if you would have to start out?
Oh gosh, it's a longer list than 3, so I'm just gonna.
You can extend it. Please extend it.
I mean, there's so many lessons. Gosh, I'm just thinking through this through here. I would say though, for a very early founder, like know your motivation of what you actually, want to achieve, and really, visualize and think big enough. Don't like limit yourself for what you see of the people around you or whatever. And part of that is really understanding your unique zone of genius. We do this exercise with my team and also it's part of our hiring process, where we ask people what's their unique zone of genius, the thing that only they could do is like unique to them as a human being on the planet. Just like, no two snowflakes are alike, no two people are. So what's that, unique zone of genius? What's a zone of excellence? Zone of excellence, meaning you're better than 80 to 90% of the world at that, but there are still other people who are just as good or better than you, but you're excellent. Zone of competence, where it's like a learned thing. You've learned how to do it because you've had to, your startup, you're doing everything, but it's not intrinsic to you and you don't much like it. And someone else could be much, much better than you, right? At that thing. And then finally, what's your zone of suck? Like, what do you suck at? Like, everybody sucks at something, right? These are the things that you want to make sure in the zone of competence and zone of suck that you are either delegating that stuff or deleting it, but like you're not trying to do it yourself. I would say double down on your strengths, on your genius and excellence, really get to understand that and hire the rest. Don't try to do it all. Founders that are in kind of control and perfectionism throttle their businesses. The other thing I would say is it's vital to accept failure as part of your process. Failure is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn. It's like a scientist in a lab, like you're testing hypotheses, to get to product market fit or convince someone to buy your product. You've got to be learning from your customers. You've got to be trying different things. Like, should that button be over here on the app or should it be over here? What's better? How can we, and like, being on that, being on your numbers, learning from the failures and forgiving yourself for the failures. Again, failure is part of the process. So let's destigmatize it. Let's say it's failing forward, but it's an essential component of any kind of innovation. And then I would say surround yourself with people who truly have your back. And I don't mean sycophants. I mean people who are going to speak truth to power to you, right? But they know you and they genuinely want you to succeed. They're not going to fill your head with all the reasons why you can't do something, or are you sure, or like any of that. But, surround, because you are the median of the 5 closest people to you. So are you surrounded by negative people, or are you surrounded by people that are uplifting you and really have your back? There's a huge difference, and that's vital to success. This is a long list, prioritize your own self-care. Because without you, there's nothing. And if you just burn out trying to do everything yourself, there's no company. So you got to look after yourself, like not only your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, do whatever you need to do, lift weights, meditate, do yoga, jog, like, whatever it is. But like, that's actually vital. And that's kind of like the at whatever stage of the journey you're at, these things are really, really, really important.
Amazing. Yes, I totally agree, especially this average of 5 thing. It's really important because mindsets are contagious, and it's not just about having people having your back. It's also what you are adopting, like, because it goes into your subconscious. You're observing like your surroundings, and you're, creating new standards and new reactions to things. And it's contagious to become too comfortable, and we tend to become too soft and too comfortable. When I see people who can walk, but they sit on some kind of electric vehicle instead of walking because they're too lazy to walk, it's contagious. Of course, then we all become lazy, but then we could become sick and all these things. So that's very good advice.
It's really true. And, Yeah, and thank you, Sven, for raising that, because that's also true of hiring a team, because you have one person on the team, just one person, it just takes one. They can drag the whole team down. And it's crazy. So you got to hire slowly, really make sure you're, aligned, like you have the right kind of character involved in there, and fire fast. Because if you have someone who, they could be competent, they could even be good at their job, but if they have that wrong attitude, man, they can demoralize everyone, and your company's not going to succeed.
Absolutely. So if someone wants to reach you or learn more about you and your work and your platform, how can they reach you the best?
Okay, well, the best thing is, please download Podopolo. It's free in either app store, Podopolo,
Mm-hmm.
Podopolo. And when you do, feel free to, find Sven's podcast, find, Wings of Inspired Business, any of your podcasts that you love. You can connect with me there, because it's social, and pop in and say hi. And if you have a podcast, we have all kinds of really cool offers. You come into Podopolo and just hit the Get Featured button there, and that automatically triggers boosted promotion for your show and a whole series of other things. And we have a free offer that allows ad representation and all those deep AI-driven audience analytics we were talking about, and much, much more. If you're a podcaster and wish to be one of our ambassadors and make up to $2 per listener that you bring to the platform, just go to ambassador.podopolo.com and you can sign up there. We have about 800 podcasters in there so far. It's just about to debut, and when it does, you get your own affiliate link and swipe copy and a dashboard to watch your progress with automatic monthly payouts. So that's another way. And then I'm, kind of ubiquitous on social media. So on Instagram, I'm Melinda Ann with an E, Wittstock, Melinda Ann Wittstock, or Podopolo. And LinkedIn, Melinda Wittstock. You can find me there. That's a really good way to, of all the social networks, that's probably the one that I'm on kind of the most. But I'm sort of on Twitter just to really observe what's going on there. Not really so much to do a lot of posting and that kind of thing. But that's the best way. I'm pretty easily findable. Oh, and subscribe to Wings of Inspired Business, wherever you get your podcast, preferably on Podopolo.
Very good. Thank you, Melinda. That was really great. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and never miss an episode of Svencast again.